My wife Hannah announced her pregnancy at Sunday family dinner, while my golden boy brother Jason sat across from me, trying not to smile, and I knew with devastating certainty that the baby she was carrying belonged to him, because we hadn't touched each other in 6 months, while he'd been screwing her behind my back and stealing the family business I'd spent 10 years building from nothing. The pregnancy timeline was mathematically impossible for me to be the father, but perfectly aligned with the months of late work meetings and girls' nights that had coincided with Jason's sudden interest in helping Hannah with her personal projects, all while I was working 60-hour weeks to grow Dad's logistics company from 3 employees to 50 and generating the revenue that paid for their secret hotel rooms and romantic getaways. What made the betrayal even more sickening was watching my family's reaction to the news. Dad immediately started talking about Jason stepping up to help with the family expansion and taking on more leadership responsibilities in the business, while Mom gushed about how wonderful it was that the baby would keep the family close and how proud she was of Hannah for bringing new life into our dynasty. They had no idea they were celebrating my brother knocking up my wife while simultaneously planning to hand him control of the company I'd built with my own blood sweat and sleepless nights, treating my decade of sacrifice like it was just a warm-up act for the golden boy's inevitable coronation as the family's chosen heir. But what my cheating wife and backstabbing brother didn't know was that Hannah's texts had been syncing to my iPad for weeks, giving me a front-row seat to their entire affair, complete with photos, hotel receipts, and detailed plans for their future together, including how they were going to convince Dad to push me out once the baby arrived, and Jason proved himself ready for leadership. They thought they were celebrating their perfect crime at that dinner table, but they were actually attending the last family meal where I'd pretend not to know that my golden boy brother was about to inherit both my wife and the business I built, while I walked away with enough evidence to destroy everything they'd stolen and watch their house of lies collapse from the safety of my own success. My golden boy brother Jason couldn't look me in the eye while congratulating us on a pregnancy that was clearly his. To understand how my own family could celebrate my wife carrying my brother's baby while planning to hand him the business I'd sacrificed everything to build. You need to know about the 10 years I'd spent transforming Dad's failing logistics company from a 3-person operation running out of a rented garage into a 50-employee enterprise that generated enough revenue to fund everyone's comfortable lifestyle. I'd been the one handling operations client relationships, financial planning, and strategic growth, while Jason focused on what Dad generously called client relations, which mostly involved playing golf with potential customers and taking them to expensive steakhouses that my profit margins had paid for. Every major contract we'd landed, every operational improvement that had increased our efficiency, every system that had allowed us to scale without chaos, I'd designed, implemented, and managed all of it. But somehow in the family narrative, Jason's charm and social skills were viewed as equally valuable to my actual business expertise, as if schmoozing clients over drinks was the same as building the infrastructure that allowed us to deliver on our promises. I built Dad's company from 3 employees to 50, while Jason handled client relations and golf. The golden child versus scapegoat dynamic had been established so early in our lives that I'd stopped questioning it years ago, accepting that Jason could fail upward while I was expected to succeed without recognition or complaint. His college dropout had been reframed as finding his own path. His string of failed business ventures had been learning experiences that Dad had quietly funded, and his pattern of irresponsible decision-making had been dismissed as youthful energy that would eventually mature into leadership potential. Meanwhile, my engineering degree, my business successes, and my consistent reliability had been treated as baseline expectations rather than achievements worth celebrating. Every time Jason screwed up, I was the one who cleaned up the mess, and every time I exceeded expectations, the bar was simply raised higher for next time. The family had trained me to be the problem solver who never complained about unequal treatment, while training Jason to expect rescue and reward, regardless of performance. The golden boy could do no wrong, while I was expected to clean up his messes silently. What made this betrayal so devastating was that I'd thought Hannah understood and appreciated the family dynamic I'd been navigating my entire life, and that our 5-year marriage had been built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared goals that transcended the dysfunction I'd grown up with. She'd seemed to see through the favoritism that blinded my parents, recognizing my contributions while remaining diplomatically neutral about Jason's obvious shortcomings. We'd built what I thought was a partnership based on honesty and loyalty, where she supported my ambitions while I supported hers, creating the kind of stable relationship that could withstand external pressures from family members who didn't always have our best interests at heart. I'd trusted her completely, believing that our marriage was the one relationship in my life where merit mattered more than charm, and where my worth was recognized and valued instead of taken for granted. Hannah and I had built what I thought was an unshakable partnership based on trust and shared values. The discovery that would change everything happened on a Tuesday night when I was reviewing client contracts on my iPad, and Hannah's text messages started syncing automatically, revealing months of romantic conversations with my brother that I'd never suspected were happening. The first message I saw was from 3 days earlier. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Thinking about our baby growing in there makes me so wet." I stared at the screen for a full minute, my brain trying to process what I was reading before scrolling up to find dozens more messages filled with intimate details about their sexual encounters, hotel room photos, and plans for their future together, that included pushing me out of both the marriage and the family business. The technology that was supposed to keep us connected as a married couple had instead given me a front-row seat to the complete destruction of my life. Hannah's texts started syncing to my iPad, revealing months of romantic messages with my brother. Instead of confronting them immediately, I made the strategic decision to spend the night systematically documenting their entire affair, taking screenshots of every message, saving every photo, and organizing the evidence chronologically to understand the full scope of their betrayal. The hotel receipts showed monthly trips to expensive resorts that Hannah had claimed were work conferences or girls' weekends. The flight confirmations revealed romantic getaways to cities I'd never visited, with her funded by credit cards that I'd been paying off while working overtime to keep the business profitable. The most damaging evidence was their detailed discussions about timing the pregnancy announcement to coincide with Jason's promotion to CEO, using the baby as leverage to convince Dad that he deserved leadership of the company I'd built. I spent the night screenshotting evidence of their months-long affair and secret vacations. But the most devastating realization came when I calculated the pregnancy timeline against our own intimate history, confirming what my gut had already told me during dinner, that the baby Hannah was carrying had been conceived during a period when we hadn't been intimate in months, perfectly aligning with their affair timeline. The medical dates, the conception window, the development milestones she'd mentioned, everything pointed to Jason being the father of the child my family was celebrating as the next generation of our dynasty. The irony was sickening. They were planning to use my brother's illegitimate child to justify giving him control of the legitimate business I'd spent a decade building through actual work and competence rather than charm and manipulation. The pregnancy timeline perfectly matched their affair. The baby was obviously Jason's. The temptation to confront them immediately was overwhelming. But I'd learned enough about family dynamics over the years to know that emotional outbursts would only give them ammunition to paint me as the unstable one, who was overreacting to what they'd inevitably frame as a misunderstanding or temporary mistake that didn't warrant destroying the family unity they valued above honesty or accountability. Instead, I made the strategic decision to maintain complete silence about my discovery while continuing to gather evidence that would make denial impossible when I finally chose to reveal what I knew. Every day I went to work, came home, and acted like the devoted husband and reliable son they expected me to be, all while documenting their continued betrayal and planning for the moment when I'd have enough proof to destroy their narrative before they could spin it. The silence gave me power they didn't know I had, allowing me to control the timing and circumstances of their exposure rather than reacting emotionally to their manipulation and lies. I decided to stay silent and let them think their secret was safe while I gathered irrefutable proof. 3 days later, my patience was rewarded when I overheard Hannah on a speakerphone call with Jason while she was in our bedroom discussing their concerns about potential detesting and how they'd handle questions about paternity if anyone in the family started asking uncomfortable questions about timing. "What if your dad insists on a detest?" Hannah asked, her voice carrying the kind of panic that confirmed everything I'd suspected. "He's old school about bloodlines and family legacy. If he wants proof that this baby belongs in the family business succession plan." Jason's response was classic golden boy arrogance. "Dad's not going to question anything. He wants me to take over anyway, and this baby gives him the perfect excuse to make it official. Mike's always been the worker bee, but I'm the one with the vision for growing the company." The casual dismissal of my decade of work was infuriating, but their obvious anxiety about DNA testing gave me the exact leverage I'd need to prove their deception scientifically. I overheard Hannah on speakerphone with Jason panicking about potential DNA testing. Meanwhile, my family had begun their predictable campaign of celebrating the golden boy's impending fatherhood while treating me like a supporting character in his success story. Dad started making comments about how family responsibilities would help Jason mature into the leader he'd always known he could be, and Mom began planning nursery arrangements that would keep Hannah close to the family compound. The most insulting part was how they talked about the pregnancy as if it was Jason's achievement rather than mine, subtly shifting the credit for expanding the family legacy to the brother who'd stolen my wife while I'd been working to support everyone's comfortable lifestyle. Their body language around Jason had changed to that of grandparents in waiting, while I was increasingly treated as the uncle figure who'd help support his brother's growing family through my continued business contributions. The family was already celebrating our pregnancy, while I knew the truth they'd never accept. That's when I started researching paternal DNA testing options that would provide scientific proof of what I already knew, focusing on methods that wouldn't require Jason's cooperation or consent, but would still hold up as definitive evidence when I needed to prove that the golden boy had stolen both my wife and the baby they were using to justify giving him my business. The legal implications were complex, but the scientific reality was simple. DNA doesn't lie, and neither would the test results that would destroy their carefully constructed deception. I researched DNA testing options that would give me undeniable proof of Jason's paternity. The DNA test results arrived 2 weeks later, with the clinical precision that would make denial impossible, showing a 99.7% probability that Jason was the biological father of the child Hannah was carrying, along with detailed genetic markers that proved what I'd already known, but needed to document scientifically for the confrontation that was coming. I stared at the official laboratory letterhead and the numbers that confirmed my worst suspicions, feeling a strange sense of relief that my instincts had been correct, rather than devastation that my marriage was over. The evidence was now irrefutable, not just text messages or suspicious behavior, but scientific proof that would destroy any attempt they made to gaslight me about misunderstandings or jumping to conclusions. The test also included a breakdown of genetic inheritance patterns that would make it impossible for them to claim the baby could somehow be mine, removing any wiggle room they might try to create when I finally presented the evidence publicly. The DNA test showed 99.7% probability that Jason was the father of Hannah's baby. But what pushed me from devastated husband to strategic competitor was Dad's announcement at the following Sunday's family dinner that Jason would be promoted to CEO of the company I'd built, while I would transition to an operations consultant role that would keep me involved without giving me actual authority over the decisions that would determine our success or failure. "It's time for fresh leadership," Dad said, like the 10 years I'd spent growing the business from 3 employees to 50 meant nothing compared to Jason's charm and my wife's pregnancy. Jason's going to be a father now, which means he understands responsibility and legacy in a way that will drive him to take the company to the next level. The irony was breathtaking. They were using my brother's affair baby as justification for giving him control of my life's work, treating his ability to impregnate my wife as evidence of business leadership, while my actual track record of success was dismissed as irrelevant. Dad announced Jason would become CEO of the company I built, while I became an operations consultant. The family's gaslighting campaign that followed was predictable, but still infuriating, with everyone suddenly rewriting history to minimize my contributions while inflating Jason's potential for future success. Mom started talking about how Jason had always shown natural leadership qualities that just needed the right opportunity to flourish, while Dad claimed that my operational focus had been valuable, but that vision and inspiration were what the company needed for its next growth phase. "Jason deserves a chance to prove himself," became the family mantra, as if he hadn't already proven himself incompetent through years of failed ventures that I'd cleaned up or helped fund. They spoke about giving him leadership experience, as if running the company was an internship program rather than the culmination of a decade of my strategic planning and relationship building. The most insulting part was their suggestion that I should be excited about mentoring my younger brother through his transition to CEO, helping him learn the systems I'd created so he could take credit for implementing them successfully. They said Jason deserved a chance to prove himself with the company I'd spent 10 years building. That's when I realized the only winning move was to stop playing a game where the rules were designed to ensure I'd always lose, regardless of my performance or contributions. Instead of fighting for recognition in a family that would never give it to me, I started planning my exit strategy and developing the business plan that would let me compete against them, using everything I'd learned while building their success. The thought of Jason trying to run a logistics company without understanding operations, client relationships, or financial planning was almost amusing, especially when I'd be running a superior competitor that would expose his incompetence through market forces rather than family arguments. I realized the only winning move was to stop playing their game entirely. Over the following weeks, I assembled what could only be described as a complete portfolio of betrayal, documenting every aspect of their affair and business manipulation, with the same methodical precision I'd used to build the company they were stealing from me. The evidence included months of text messages between Hannah and Jason, discussing everything from hotel room preferences to their plans for convincing Dad that Jason deserved the CEO position once the baby arrived. The most damaging screenshots showed them laughing about how clueless I was about their relationship with Jason, bragging about screwing my wife in our own bed while I worked late to meet client deadlines. Hannah had sent him photos from our anniversary dinner, captioning them, "Wish you were here instead," while I was trying to salvage our marriage through romantic gestures that she was mocking to her lover. But beyond the sexual betrayal, their messages revealed a calculated campaign to undermine my position in the family business with Jason, promising Hannah that he'd handle Mike once he became CEO, and she could finally live the lifestyle she deserved, without having to pretend to appreciate my work ethic. I assembled a complete portfolio, proving months of betrayal, while they celebrated our pregnancy. The business documentation told an equally damning story about who had actually been responsible for the company's success over the past decade, with contracts, financial records, and client testimonials that proved I'd been the driving force behind every major achievement Dad attributed to family teamwork or Jason's natural leadership potential. The numbers were undeniable. I'd personally negotiated 80% of our major contracts, designed the operational systems that allowed us to handle 50 employees efficiently, and maintained the client relationships that generated the revenue everyone else spent freely on. Golf memberships and expensive dinners. My project management had reduced delivery times by 30% while increasing profit margins. My financial planning had built the cash reserves that kept us stable during economic downturns. And my operational improvements had created the scalable infrastructure that made our growth possible rather than chaotic. 10 years of contracts, systems, and relationships I'd built single-handedly while Jason played golf and stole my wife. The timeline of Jason and Hannah's secret relationship was particularly devastating when laid out chronologically, showing 8 months of systematic deception that had coincided exactly with my heaviest workload period, when I'd been putting in 60-hour weeks to secure the contracts that would fund their affair. Every business trip I'd taken to close deals had been an opportunity for them to spend nights together. In our house every late evening, I'd worked to exceed client expectations, had given them time for romantic dinners at restaurants I'd earned the money to afford, and every weekend I'd sacrificed to ensure business success had been their chance to take romantic getaways to destinations I'd never been invited to visit. The social media evidence showed them at luxury resorts during periods when Hannah had told me she was attending work conferences or visiting her sister, with photo metadata proving they'd been together in cities hundreds of miles away, while I'd been home managing the business operations that funded their lifestyle. The evidence showed 8 months of secret meetings while they pretended to be supportive family. But perhaps the most crucial intelligence I'd gathered was my assessment of which clients were loyal to me personally rather than the company, and the results were devastating for Jason's chances of succeeding as CEO without my involvement. 60% of our revenue came from contracts with clients who'd specifically requested to work with me, trusted my judgment over company policies, and had indicated they'd follow me to a competitor if I left. These weren't just business relationships, they were personal connections, built over years of delivering exceptional service, solving problems creatively, and maintaining the kind of professional integrity that can't be transferred to someone else through promotion or family connections. The client feedback was consistent. They valued my expertise, reliability, and problem-solving abilities, while viewing Jason as a charming but ultimately superficial presence who was good for entertainment, but not for serious business decisions. 60% of our revenue came from clients who trusted me personally, not the company. With Dad's 60th birthday dinner approaching, I realized I had the perfect opportunity to present all this evidence to the extended family in a setting where gaslighting and emotional manipulation would be impossible because too many witnesses would hear the truth simultaneously. The guest list included uncles, aunts, and family friends who had business relationships with our company, creating an audience that would understand the implications of what I was about to reveal. The private dining room Dad had reserved would give me the controlled environment I needed to present evidence systematically, and the celebratory atmosphere would make their shock more profound when they realized they were witnessing the destruction of everything they thought they knew about family loyalty and business succession. Dad's birthday dinner would give me the perfect audience for revealing the truth. Before revealing everything at Dad's birthday dinner, I needed to ensure that my exit strategy would be legally bulletproof and financially devastating to their plans for continuing the business. Without me, I spent evenings consulting with employment lawyers about the enforceability of my non-compete clause and discovered that the agreement Dad had drawn up years ago was so poorly written that it wouldn't hold up in court, especially since I'd been functioning as an unpaid partner rather than a traditional employee. The legal consultation revealed that my contributions to the company's intellectual property, client relationships, and operational systems gave me significant leverage if they tried to prevent me from competing, and that Jason's promotion to CEO while I was demoted would constitute constructive dismissal that would void most restrictive covenants. More importantly, the lawyers confirmed that I could resign immediately after presenting my evidence without legal consequences, giving me the freedom to start competing against them as soon as I walked away from their toxic dysfunction. I consulted lawyers about resignation terms and discovered my non-compete was unenforceable. Meanwhile, I was spending my nights developing a comprehensive business plan for a logistics company that would systematically destroy everything Jason thought he was inheriting, using my decade of industry experience to create a superior competitor that would expose his incompetence through market forces rather than family arguments. The plan included securing startup funding through business relationships I'd built independently, identifying office space that would be strategically located near our biggest clients, and developing service offerings that would exceed what our current company provided while undercutting their pricing structure. My competitive advantage was overwhelming. I knew every client's specific needs, every operational weakness in our current systems, and every vendor relationship that could be improved with better management and personal attention that Jason would never be capable of providing. I spent nights building a business plan for a logistics company that would crush theirs. The client transition strategy required delicate handling, since I couldn't appear to be soliciting business before my resignation. But I started having casual conversations with key accounts about ensuring service continuity during potential changes in our company's leadership structure. The responses were more encouraging than I'd expected, with several major clients expressing concerns about Jason's readiness for increased responsibility. "You're the reason we stay with your company," one of our biggest clients told me during a routine service call. "If anything happened to your involvement, we'd have to reconsider our options." The sentiment was consistent across our major accounts. They trusted my competence and reliability, while viewing Jason as a liability who might jeopardize the quality of service they'd grown accustomed to receiving. These conversations confirmed that my departure would trigger an immediate client exodus that Jason would be powerless to prevent through charm or family connections. I started subtle conversations with key clients about ensuring service continuity. But the most difficult preparation was accepting that choosing self-respect and professional success meant losing the people I'd grown up believing were permanent fixtures in my life, even though they'd proven they were willing to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort and convenience. The emotional reality was stark. Dad would choose his golden boy over his competent son. Mom would prioritize family harmony over justice, and Hannah would continue her affair while expecting me to financially support their lifestyle choices. They'd made their priorities clear through their actions, and maintaining relationships with people who'd betrayed me would only enable further exploitation. I was preparing to lose everything I'd thought I wanted in order to gain everything I actually needed: independence, self-respect, and the freedom to build something that couldn't be stolen by people who valued charm over competence. I accepted that choosing self-respect meant losing people who'd never truly respected me. Dad's 60th birthday dinner brought together exactly the audience I needed to witness the truth, without giving my family the chance to gaslight me or rewrite history in private conversations later. The private dining room at his favorite steakhouse was filled with uncles, aunts, family friends, and business associates who had watched me grow the company over the past decade and would understand the implications of what I was about to reveal. I sat quietly through the appetizers and toasts, watching Jason and Hannah exchange knowing glances, while Dad talked about family legacy and the next generation taking charge of the business we'd all built together. The irony was perfect. They were celebrating their theft while surrounded by people who would witness its exposure. Dad's 60th birthday dinner brought together everyone who needed to hear the truth. When Dad finished his speech about passing the torch to Jason, I stood up and pulled out the folder that contained 8 months of evidence, spreading DNA test results, text message, screenshots, and hotel receipts across the white tablecloth where everyone could see them. "Before we celebrate Jason's promotion," I said calmly, "I think everyone should know that the baby Hannah's carrying belongs to him, not me, and they've been planning this takeover while screwing behind my back for 8 months. The silence was immediate and complete as people processed the DNA test showing 99.7% probability that Jason was the father, followed by screenshots of their affair. Planning discussions and hotel receipts that proved their secret relationship had been funded by the business profits I'd generated through 60-hour work weeks. Here's Hannah texting Jason about feeling him inside her. While thinking about their baby, I continued reading directly from the evidence. And here's Jason promising her she'd finally live the lifestyle she deserved once he became CEO and could handle Mike appropriately. I spread 8 months of evidence across the birthday dinner table while they watched in horror. The family's immediate response was exactly what I'd predicted. Dad tried to dismiss the DNA evidence as just a misunderstanding, while Mom insisted that family problems should be handled privately and that I was destroying everyone's happiness by airing personal issues at a celebration. They attempted to protect their golden boy by minimizing the betrayal and shifting blame to me for choosing the wrong time and place to address relationship issues. "Maybe you and Hannah just need counseling," Dad said, like 8 months of systematic deception could be solved with therapy sessions. "Jason's going to be a father now, which means he needs our support, not accusations that could damage his reputation right when he's stepping into leadership." The most insulting part was Uncle Bob suggesting that I was probably overreacting because these things happen in marriages, and that tearing the family apart wouldn't solve anything. They were trying to normalize adultery, pregnancy fraud, and business theft as minor family disagreements that I should handle with more maturity and forgiveness. They tried to dismiss DNA evidence as just a misunderstanding while protecting their golden boy. That's when I delivered the declaration that would end my relationship with all of them, permanently speaking with the calm certainty that comes from finally understanding your true priorities and boundaries. "You made your choice," I told Dad directly while looking at the entire table. "You chose the golden boy who stole my wife and got her pregnant over the son who spent 10 years building the business you're giving him. You chose charm over competence, favoritism over fairness, and betrayal over loyalty. I turned to face Jason and Hannah, who were sitting there looking like they'd been caught in a crime they'd thought was perfectly planned. And you two chose each other while using me as your personal ait and business incubator. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences without me cleaning up your messes or funding your lifestyle. And the finality in my voice made it clear this wasn't a negotiation or an emotional outburst that would blow over with time. It was a business decision made by someone who'd finally stopped accepting unacceptable treatment from people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with basic decency. You made your choice. You chose the golden boy over the son who built what you're giving him. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my resignation letter, placing it in front of Dad, while the entire table watched in stunned silence. Effective immediately, I resigned from the company I built, I said, pulling out my office keys and company credit cards. Jason can try to run a 50-employee logistics operation without understanding operations, client relationships, or financial planning. I'm sure his charm will be very helpful when the major contracts start canceling. I stood up and pushed in my chair with the kind of finality that comes from walking away from toxic people who will never change their priorities or acknowledge their mistakes. Hannah, you can keep the house and everything in it. I'll be building something better with people who understand the difference between loyalty and exploitation. The last thing I saw before leaving was their faces processing the reality that I was serious about walking away from everything they'd thought they could steal from me, while keeping me around to manage the consequences of their choices. I resigned from the company I built and walked away from the family that chose betrayal. For the first time in my life, the family that never listened to me, never valued my contributions, and never respected my boundaries, was completely, utterly silent. No gaslighting, no excuses, no attempts to minimize what had happened, just silence as they realized that their golden boy was about to inherit a business he couldn't run without the brother he'd betrayed, and the wife he'd stolen came with a baby that would remind them daily of their moral failure. The silence was louder than any argument they'd ever won, more powerful than any manipulation they'd ever deployed, and more permanent than any relationship they'd ever destroyed through their selfishness and favoritism. For the first time in my life, the family that never listened was just silence. The collapse of everything Jason thought he was inheriting happened faster than even I had predicted, proving that competence can't be transferred through promotion or family connections, only earned through years of experience and genuine understanding of how businesses actually operate. Within 6 months of my departure, the golden boy had lost 60% of our major clients, failed to maintain the operational systems I'd built, and nearly bankrupted the company through a combination of incompetence and arrogance. The clients I'd warned about service continuity followed through on their concerns, exactly as they'd promised, canceling contracts worth millions in annual revenue and citing poor communication, missed deadlines, and Jason's inability to solve problems that required actual expertise rather than charm and empty promises. Dad called me twice trying to negotiate my return, but I let both calls go to voicemail, where his voice revealed the desperation of someone who'd finally realized the difference between the son who'd built his legacy and the son who was destroying it. Within 6 months, Jason had lost 60% of the clients and nearly bankrupted the company. Meanwhile, my new logistics company captured most of their former clients while providing the superior service and personal attention that Jason had never been capable of delivering, proving that merit-based success creates sustainable competitive advantages that favoritism-based promotion can't match. The business plan I developed during those late-night strategy sessions became the foundation for a company that generated more revenue in its first year than Dad's operation had managed in its last 3 years under my management. The irony was perfect. By stealing the business I'd built, my family had forced me to build something better, while freeing me from the obligation to clean up their mistakes or tolerate their dysfunction. My new company captured most of their former clients while I found peace away from their chaos. Looking back now, I realize that the most valuable thing I gained from walking away wasn't financial success or professional vindication, but the profound quiet that comes from no longer listening to people who had never respected my voice, valued my contributions, or acknowledged my worth beyond what I could provide for their comfort and convenience. The silence in my life where their chaos used to be wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities, authentic relationships, and the kind of self-respect that can only be built by choosing your own values over other people's manipulation. They'd taught me that family isn't about blood or shared history, but about mutual respect and loyalty that works both ways, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is to stop enabling their dysfunction by removing yourself as their target and safety net. I learned that peace is loud when you stop listening to people who never respected your voice,